Kekoa Nation, to another video in my 2022 Boise State football preview series. I'm incredibly excited about this video, as I have been about all of them, but I have kind of a little bit of a surprise guest on with us today. We originally, this is the secondary preview. It was supposed to be with Brandon Thompson. Due to some family issues, he wasn't able to make it. I reached out to David Michael, and he hooked me up, and the next thing I know, I've got our guest on here with me today. This is an incredible guest I have on today with a unique perspective, having been on the team recently. I'm incredibly excited to introduce Kekoa Nawahine onto the program today. Boise State safety, 2016 to 2019. He had 147 solo tackles, 268 total in his career, 7 tackles for loss, 6 interceptions, 14 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 fumble recoveries. A prolific career at Boise State, was a great secondary player for Boise State. I'm incredibly excited to have him on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to chopping it up and diving into the secondary.
It's incredibly exciting to have to go on today. We're going to talk about the Q&A. We're going to do a quick Q&A with him, just talk about some of his experiences at Boise State, some of his perspectives. We're going to talk a little bit about the 2021 team, a little bit of stat retrospective there. We're going to talk about the newcomers here for Boise State in the secondary position. We're going to talk about playmakers and starters, kind of give our perspectives on who we think is going to be taking those starting positions and being those big playmakers for Boise State this season. We're going to go through 3 questions for the season as far as the secondary go, 3 keys to the season, and a quick prediction section to wrap it all up with. So it's going to be a fantastic video, in-depth preview here of the Boise State secondary. And again, with a player who was on the team not that long ago, so a unique perspective bringing to this video for sure. So let's just get started here with the Q&A then. One of the things that some players and some coaches have identified as a distraction, while the fans definitely loved it, was the turnover props. That was a big trend in college football while you were on the field. It's kind of gone away a little bit. Miami University just finally retired their infamous turnover chain. I know when Jerron Johnson was on Ron Count's channel talking about the secondary, I asked him what he thought about the turnover throw, and he said it wasn't coming back. But I just want to kind of know, as a player on the field, you had a lot of turnovers during that time, 6 interceptions, 5 fumble recoveries. You got to sit on that throne. What's your thought process on these turnover props? Is that something you liked as a player? Would you like to bring them back?
No, I liked them. Short story. As a player, I think it's fun. Anytime you get a chance to celebrate things, I mean, that's really what it's all about in football, right? And being able to celebrate with your teammates and have something like that is always a good time. I mean, I see where people would think it's a distraction, or you want to get rid of them. Either way, I think it's fine. I think they're fun to have, and I think it's fun to celebrate and get that time with your teammates. Regardless, you're going to celebrate. So not having the turnover thrown or chain or belt, whatever it was at the time, it kind of rotated around. It's a fun thing to have. I don't see really any harm in it. So I would think it'd be cool to bring it back. It's kind of, like you said, kind of going away from the trend. So not really a big thing anymore, but while it was going, it was definitely a lot of fun.
Well, I think you guys had the turnover bike. I think that was the year before the throne. You guys had the turnover bike, I think, that people ran on as well. So there's again, it's a big part of the game, or it was a big part of the game there for a few years, and it's kind of started to go away. But here is Andy Avalos, new coaching staff. They're coming in. They definitely would be able to use it. Boise State secondary has been prolific. Well, not just their secondary, but the defense overall has been prolific at creating turnovers. So who knows what will happen in the future there. But it's unique to get a player's perspective like that, because, again, the fans definitely love seeing the players going over there and getting pumped after turnover. I thought it really helped kind of bring the energy of the team together. Kind of switching gears here a little bit. Some of these players that are now in their senior year, actually quite a few of these players that are in their senior year in the secondary and on the defense, were underclassmen while you were there at Boise State. You overlapped with a couple of them there. What was kind of your perspective, or do you have a perspective on those guys, their leadership capabilities, kind of what their impressions were to you, and kind of have they lived up to your expectations for them?
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch the secondary, for me especially, going to games last year, because I played with a lot of those guys, and they were a lot younger guys, but they still got playing time, and being able to see how they've grown and evolved up to this point has been really fun to watch, and I'm really excited to watch for this season. Speaking specifically of like Tyreek Jones and JL Skinner. And, ever since they've came into the program, they've been guys that have been able to contribute, guys that have made plays on the field, and they've continued to excel in that area. And so seeing those guys in the back end especially make plays and be a pretty dominant force and a dominant duo has been fun to watch. I think it's going to carry on again this year. On the corner position, I think there's been a lot of injuries with Markel Reed and Tyreek LaBeouf, and those guys are really talented. You've got Nohi, Kaniho, that's there, and a lot of capabilities. But it's been fun for me to watch those guys grow. When I was leaving jail, was a freshman, and I was really impressed with his understanding of the game that quickly. I think that's what separates a lot of people. Obviously, you have a lot of people that are athletic, and he's extremely athletic, but his understanding of the game was at a high level early on, which allowed him to play early. And same thing with Tyreek. You see a lot of things in the way that people talk about him on the team, the coaches, really good leadership styles, guys that you want to go out and you want to play around and play for. And that creates a really strong bond on defense and on the team as well. So those two, especially, I think, are really strong leaders and going to be a really strong backbone to the secondary.
Obviously, you were under Andy Avalos there when he was the defensive coordinator for Boise State. When you were playing on the team there, did you ever kind of see him coming back and being the head coach for Boise State? Was that something you ever thought was going to happen?
Yeah, I could definitely. I think it was a great move. When I knew that he was one of the candidates, I was really hopeful that would be him. I loved playing for him. I was actually really sad when he left to Oregon my senior year, and that had to be my last year. And so that was unfortunate, but I think it was a great move, and I could definitely see him being in the role that he's in now. It was unfortunately just down to a couple games, a couple plays. I mean, one or two plays in those games that made last season the way that it was. I think this season will be a lot different, and I'm hopeful that it will be. I think he's a great coach. He has a lot of understanding, intelligence of the game. He's a player's coach, connects with the players, and cares about developing these guys. And so I think with those are all kind of the recipe and the keys to success. And so hope that's the way that things turn out. I think it's great. I think it'll be a great opportunity to see where they land this year for sure.
Yeah, everybody keeps forgetting that it wasn't just a head coaching change. It was an offensive coordinator change, a defensive coordinator change. I mean, it was top to bottom. You had position group coaches getting pulled out as well. So, when you come in and you just clean the board completely almost, and then have to build back up on that again. I mean, Boise State, they had some great games last season. They beat top 10 BYU, were one referee bad call away from beating Oklahoma State. So, I mean, they had a great season last year compared to what you might expect from a complete wipe like Boise State had. When you kind of go through that defensive coordinator transition, something that Boise State had to go through last season, obviously it's kind of something that's just part of the game of football. When you had to do that transition, how big of an impact does that have on the team?
From my personal experience, I think the biggest difference that we had noticed with the coordinator change was, like I talked about, that mentality. Avalos had just brought a different type of mentality and intensity to the defense and the team as a whole, but especially the defense. So I think that was the biggest way that we had felt it. I think it wasn't as big of a change as it would have been in other situations, or say where they had a whole defense coordinator and all the position coaches are new. I think that would present a big change and a challenge for these guys. But in this case, a lot of the position coaches, when I was there, when Avalos left, were still there. And we kept a lot of the same things when we were there, in the way that we played, and we had seniors that were able to kind of keep things going. There were some changes. Coach Schmedding he did a good job at playing to the people that he had and the system that was already in place and different things. And so there were changes that you got to be able to adjust and run with on the fly. But honestly, during the season, you have to do that every week to week anyways, right? So you have your call, but when you're game planning, okay, we're going to play it this way this week instead because they like to do this. And so you got to be able to adapt and adjust and overcome. And so there were changes that you had to do that with. It wasn't, in my personal experience, a huge shift in scheme because of the position coaches that were still there. We kept a lot of things the same, added a few different things, but like I said, at that level, you're always kind of adjusting and adapting anyways. And so it wasn't a huge thing.
Well, switching off the team here a little bit more towards kind of your play style on the field, 2016 was the year that they installed the retroactive targeting rules where they could come in with a replay and say, oh, that was targeting, even though it wasn't called in the field, we can now put it in. That's really hurt some players in college football. Jail Skinner especially has had a couple of retroactive targeting penalties thrown on him. Obviously that was the first year that rule was in place, your freshman year. What was kind of your impressions of that? Do you think that it's a good thing for the game? Do you think it's hurt the game? Do you think it makes it harder to be a secondary player?
I don't know that I would say it's made it harder to be a secondary player. You have to, I guess, in the sense of you have to be aware of more things. Like it's just another thing to be aware of, right? Where I hit them. I think it's overall a good move for the game. Keeping people healthier is always going to be a good thing at the end of the day. We don't want injuries. We want to be able to go out and play the game that we love physically. But keeping people safe is always important. So going back and making sure that we're targeting the right areas, I think is a good move for the game. I think it has made the game a little bit softer. I don't know about a little bit, but a lot softer than it was back in the day. And so I think that's kind of been unfortunate. And the negative side of things is people like seeing those big hits. But again, when you're trying to protect people and keep people healthy, got to make sure that we're hitting them in the right zones. And so I think overall it's been good. I think it's a good implementation. And I mean, if you just hit them, you don't hit them in the head or the shoulders or whatever, then you're all right. And so, yeah, JLo struggled with that. I mean, he's a big hitter. I think sometimes they can get a little carried away with it, but overall, I think it's a good rule.
Well, with you bringing up that topic of the kind of getting carried away with it a little bit and kind of trying to take some of those bigger hits out of the game, I think that there was always an impression among fans that there's bias among the rest, but this targeting rule has really kind of brought out those intensities of feeling, especially when you got a player like Skinner who hits so hard, and then you've got flags being thrown on him every time, whether it's a targeting play or not. Every time he makes a big hit, there's always, oh, was that targeting? Do you think, as a player perspective, do you think that biasing is a real thing that impacts the game as far as referees go, or is it just kind of something that, yeah, that might exist, but it's not going to determine a game?
Especially in terms of this rule, 100%. Yeah. And that's where I think they get carried away. Like you see things and they're playing it back, and like an offensive player, say they're going, they're lowering their pad level and kind of getting low, and maybe their helmet's going down a little bit, but they get away with a lot more, as opposed to where a defensive player, they come in and it's like, what, are we supposed to just like let ourselves get ran over? You know what I mean? Like we got to come in with some pad level, and maybe, like I said, I don't think we should be dropping our head or anything like that, but there's times where I think they get carried away where it really shouldn't be what it is, especially when you're looking at what the offensive player is doing. Like they're just running, like basically diving, with their head down, but it doesn't really matter because it's really just making sure the defense is hitting them the right way. So I think they get carried away in that sense. And I think bias is definitely a factor in those calls.
All right, last question here. By the time you got to Boise State, it had been 6 years since Boise had played Idaho. Do you ever regret not getting to play them? Was that something you ever thought about? Would you like to see the rivalry renewed?
I think it would have been fun for sure. Just because of the history of it all. I think it's just at the point now where maybe it'd be fun for fans to come and see once or twice. I think it would be maybe it would be competitive, but I think it would be pretty lopsided for a majority of the games. And that's never really a fun, maybe it's fun for half, or maybe, like I said, it's fun for a season or two where fans get to see this rivalry renewed. But I never really thought much about it, just because it just seems to me like they're in different situations now than where they've been historically.
Well, since you just mentioned that, I will ask you one more question here. What's your perspective on Boise State scheduling FCS teams?
Yeah, I think, as a player, it's fun to play as many big name schools as possible to really challenge yourself and feel like, no, we're at that same level. It doesn't really matter who this school is or what conference they play in. That's kind of been the Boise State mentality, is the underdogs, and coming in and kind of shocking people. And so that's always what I've loved about Boise State, and always the mentality that I've had in my life. And so it's always nice to have that. To be honest, I never really thought much about, I didn't really care who we were playing when I was there. Like anyone can beat anyone in the reality, you know what I mean? There's a lot of really talented people at any level of the game. And so whether I'm playing Alabama or whether I'm playing UT Martin, like to me, where people get in trouble is not preparing the same way. So for me, it was always like, I want to play at my best. I want to prepare to the best of my abilities. I want to progress, and I want our team to get better. And it really doesn't matter who it is that we're playing. We have a chance to get better that week. And so I never really cared who it was that we were playing. In that sense.
Wraps up our Q&A section of the video. We're going to move into the 2021 stats retrospective. Here we're going to talk about the 2021 Boise State secondary and kind of what they did last season and some of those players that are coming back. And then we'll move into looking at this 2022 team. So quick 2021 retrospective. The secondary was very involved last season, especially early on. The front seven kind of had some issues with some broken tackles or not getting to the quarterback as fast as needed to. So the secondary made a lot of tackles. 45%, 357 out of 790 tackles by the Boise State defense were by secondary players. A fourth of those were from Skinner. We'll talk about him later on. But he had a great season. The secondary overall made a big impact for this team. Obviously, you'd kind of like to see that number a little bit lower with maybe the quarterback getting hit before he gets the ball off or getting the running back before he gets past that front line. But the secondary was there when they needed them to be. I thought that it was going to be kind of a question mark for last season, especially when you're missing some key players there like Avery Williams. But the secondary stepped in, some transfers stepped in, some big names that were already on the team that kind of had their moment in the spotlight stepped up, and it was a great season for this secondary. 35 passes defended. Now that is a lower number. That 35 passes defended is the lowest since since 2006, if you don't count 2020 and 2018. But they were great in the turnover department. They had 13 interceptions. Compared to 3 that they had in 2020. So that was a major step up. And it was their most since 2015. In 2015, there were 22 interceptions total, 15 by the secondary. So it was a great step up by the secondary. Almost all those picks except one came from secondary players. So when I talk about a total reversal from that 2020 to 2021, that's what I'm talking about. Turnover department, they gave up quite a few passes in between, but when it mattered in the end zone, those big play moments, they were kind of a make or to break it defense. You know, they gave up a lot of big plays, but they made big plays as well. And that really allowed this defense to be a dominant force for them. They also had 19 points per game, which is their fewest since 2012 when they gave up 15.77 points per game. And then they gave up 206.9 yards per game, which is also their best since 2012. So in a lot of ways, this was a very historic secondary. I expect big things from them coming into this season. Some standout players from last year that I think are going to have some big impact this year is obviously J.L. Skinner, 92 tackles, 2 interceptions. Tyreek Jones, another safety player, 52 tackles, 2 interceptions, led the teams in passes defended. And then Tyreek LaBeouf had 3 picks. Biggers and Kaniho combined for 79 tackles and 12 passes defended. That's Kaniho, the younger there. As far as main losses for the secondary, they pretty much all come back. Kaniho, the older, is the only one that's going to be gone. 34 tackles and interception. But his younger brother is still on the team. He had a great year. A bunch of players come back for this Boise State team. What's kind of your perspective on what this team did last season? And were you kind of surprised considering what 2020 was?
No, I'm not. I'm not surprised at all. I think those guys are loaded with talent. I think they were last year. Like you said, you have all the guys that you named: JL, Tyreek, Markel. He's been hurt. He's really talented. Tyreek LaBeouf's really talented. Caleb Biggers came in and played well. They have a lot of talent and a lot of. They're a good, solid crew. You know what I mean? So their performance never surprised me at all. I've seen those guys play really well for a long time. So I think 2021 they did well. And I think it's only going to get better. Like you said, a lot of them are returning. A lot of experience, a lot of ability, a lot of athletic dudes on there, and a lot of smart dudes. A lot of dudes that know how to lead a defense, lead a secondary, and have an even better year this year.
Well, like you said, there's a bunch of guys returning to this team, so they're going to be loaded at the experience level. We do have a couple of newcomers in, so we'll talk about that real quick here. So 2 newcomers for the secondary. This was a really good class by Andy Avalos, but it was very heavy on kind of those front 7 type of guys. Only 2 players specifically coming in for the secondary. Of course, you always have players come in for one thing and then they get moved around to another thing. So that might change. But right now, off the bat, you got 3-star Deontay Thornton, 6'2", 185 pounds. He had offers from California, Arizona State. He had some Power 5 offers. He's the guy that's coming in. Obviously, with all the experience on the roster, you're probably not going to see any of these newcomers right away, but definitely building for the future there. And then also 3-star Keenan McCaddy. He's listed as an athlete, wide receiver, and defensive back, 6'3", 180 pounds. Sounds like Boise State's going to probably use him in the secondary there. Now, when you kind of look at a class that has only a couple of secondary players, do you think that's reflective maybe of Andy Avalos's front 7 route, or is it just more reflective on the needs of the team?
I would probably say more reflective on the needs of the team. Yeah, I think obviously Coach Avalos is really experienced with the front 7 and maybe has a focus there, but he's a defensive coordinator as well. He's a head coach now. He knows how to cater to a defense or to a team in general. But I think it's more just reflective of their needs as a team.
Well, talking about that team, again, the needs of the team were fully being addressed this season by the plethora of players coming back. So again, it wasn't necessarily a need of just got to bring in a bunch of transfers and everything, because Boise State is stacked in their secondary. Let's talk a little bit about some of those playmakers and starters for Boise State this season. So kind of leading it right off the top here with safety, because we'll kind of adhere here to your roots a little bit. Leading off the top here with safety, we're going to kind of go through these in class. The potential players here is kind of your alpha. You're definitely going to be starters, and kind of your bravo, kind of a little bit more. You might see them on the field, but probably playing a little bit more of a backup role. So talking real quick here, we got a couple players switching positions, and really, I was going to do this video last week. I'm glad it ended up happening this week, because just as of last week, there was some switches here. So they moved over Isaiah Bradshaw and Jared Reed, the Utah State 6-year transfer for Boise State. They moved both of those players over into the safety position to give a little bit of more depth here. Not expecting necessarily the redshirt freshman Bradshaw or the 6th-year player Reed to make a huge impact because of the guys you already have there, but they are going to need to be replacing one of those primary safety players, because like I said, nobody's leaving the team there in the safety, but they did end up moving Tyreek Jones over to nickel. So while Skinner is going to be on our alpha block, he's 100% definitely going to be starting. There's going to be quite a safety battle over who's going to be that second safety there for Boise State. Right now, and this is according to Ron Count's Idaho Statement, they have Rodney Robinson, Shea Oladipo, and Zion Washington. So the redshirt freshman going up against 2 sophomores. All those guys, incredibly athletic, lots of promise. It's going to be a real battle to the finish here to who might end up. I would probably give it a little bit more experience maybe to Oladipo or Robinson, but do you have a thought on these guys or who you'd like to see maybe coming in and being that free safety underneath Skinner?
Yeah, like you said, I think all those guys are really athletic. And I think Rodney, he had chances where he came in and played well last season. Same thing with Shea. I think he's a ball hawk. I think he plays the ball really well and can make plays pretty well. So I think he's a good candidate. But like I don't think Zion got in last year, not to which I've seen. So don't really know. That's more of a question mark. Shea and Rodney, I think are both good. I think Shea is more of a ball hawk. If I had to put a name to it. Another guy that I think played well last year, kind of came in, and maybe he's more of depth for JL, but Alex Tubner, I think he came in and he played well when he had to, because like we said, JL was kind of out a lot of different times during the season, and Alex Tube stepped up and played really well, and he's another guy that's just a great dude, good leader, smart guy. And so maybe they swing him over there a little bit as well. I think they'll have a lot of flexibility. I think he has the capabilities of being able to do it. Obviously, there are a little bit of difference between boundary side and field side. nothing that's out of his realm of capability. So if they wanted to, I think they could throw him over there as well for other options. But no, I like Rodney and Shea both. Seem like great guys, great players, and can contribute a lot.
Now, obviously, safety is one of those positions that requires a ton of intelligence and field awareness because you end up playing a lot of the zone kind of coverage there over the top. Is there a kind of a point there where you favor awareness over athleticism? Or if you just kind of have, like, for instance, redshirt freshman Zion Washington doesn't have any playing experience, but 6'2", 205 pounds, is the tallest of all these guys that are vying for this position. Sounds like he's super athletic. Haven't seen him, but the coaches are putting him into this argument, even though he has that lack of awareness. What's kind of that cutoff for you between saying, all right, we're going to take a guy who's super experienced, or this is just a freak of nature, we got to get him on the field? What's kind of your perspective on that?
Honestly, my perspective, I think I would definitely rather have somebody with awareness, field intelligence to a certain point, right? Obviously. And not to say that that a redshirt freshman doesn't have that. Like I said, JL and some other guys came in and they had that type of football intelligence where they could step on the field and be fine. And obviously they're athletic. That's why I say to a point, like you have to be athletic enough to go out and to play. But I would much rather have somebody personally that has a high level of awareness, high level of football intelligence. Because at that point, everybody's athletic, right? If they're on the team, they're going to be athletic. They're going to be able to make plays. And so the guys that can put themselves in positions, better positions, are going to be able to make more plays. That can read things quicker. Maybe they're a little bit slower when you're timing a 40, but they're reading it quicker. So that really doesn't matter. Or they're getting there quicker anyways. There's a lot more things that translate on to field speed and field athleticism, I guess, than just straight up how fast they run 40 or this or that. So I think where that really comes into play is their football intelligence and their awareness. So when comparing the two, I would definitely rather have the intelligence and awareness rather than athleticism if I had to choose one.
I think you might end up seeing something where you kind of have not necessarily a true rotation. You have someone who's a starter, but you still, these guys who don't end up as a starter, you're going to see them during the season, I think, regardless of injury. Boise State, Andy Avalos in general, has done a great job of that last season, rotating guys through, keeping guys fresh. So I think you'll probably end up seeing all of these guys potentially making an impact out there. But again, Boise's going to have to settle on one for a starter. I'm honestly at a toss-up here. For me, I'd probably go just because I don't know Washington. You know, I'm not in the coach's room. I don't see him playing. Just from what I've seen, probably Oladipo Robinson. Like you said, Oladipo, 2 interceptions last year with limited playing time. He's definitely got a nose for the ball. Robinson, a little bit of a better tackler, I think. So I don't know. You kind of go maybe one of those two guys. Either way, I'm trusting Andy Avalos and the secondary coaches to make these right decisions. But moving on to kind of talking about the cornerback there. So safety, you know, some great guys there for the safety, but a couple of questions. Cornerback, you've got another massive group of players, but I think it's going to be a little clearer here about who might be starting. You got another group of players who made a lot of impacts last year. Just kind of rattle off a few names here. Markel Reed, you mentioned, obviously dealt with some injuries, but incredibly talented. Had that starting position at the beginning of the season, and then injuries kind of took it away from him there. But Caleb Biggers, transferring from Bowling Green, came in, played great. He's got the number 1 on the roster now, so that's always a big move. I can't remember a time when Boise State had a guy take number 1 who didn't end up making a big role for Boise State. Maybe the only exception would be Octavius Evans, but he had a lot of injuries that kind of impacted his ability to get on the field there. And I'm not going to quote myself on this, but I'm pretty sure Kyle Wilson was the last secondary player to wear number 1. So this is big for him to kind of take that number, kind of indicates where he might be trending for Boise State. And then, of course, we talked about it. Keneho the Younger had a great season last year as a true freshman. 43 tackles, 7 passes defended. I incorrectly said earlier that Tyreek Jones was the pass defender leader. No, he was 7 passes defended. Keneho had the most passes defended and 2 interceptions. And, of course, you got Tyreek LaBeouf, who had that amazing pick-6 return versus UCF. I was at that game. That was incredible. And so you've just got a bunch of players on this team that are going to be vying for that starting position. Before I kind of give my opinion on who I might think starts, do you kind of look at this group and have an idea who you'd like to see at the top? You know, if you got to just lay out 2 guys, obviously you're going to see other guys throughout the season, but 2 guys up front, who's going to be your starters there?
Yeah, that's tough to pick 2 guys out of that. I really like, and I've said it obviously throughout this, I really like Markel Reed. I really like Tyreek LaBeouf, and I like Nohi Keneho a lot. I think he has a really good nose for the ball as well. I think a lot of that is kind of things that you can't teach. And I think he's got just that nose for the ball. obviously. And so I think he's really good. I think those three are really talented players, really athletic. The corner position, it's hard because, and even while I was playing, but just generally, there's a lot of people that get out on the field because of, you're out on an island, maybe they're running you on fades a lot, and so you see a lot of people that get playing time, and which is good that they have, the amount of depth that they do have, and so many people fighting for a playing spot. I think we're going to see a good amount of rotation throughout the season, if I had to guess, because they have the talent that they have. I think if they're all able to stay healthy, Nohi and Markel and Tyreek are my favorite, probably mostly because I've played with them. I know the type of guys that they are, and want to see them do well, and then know that they will do well if they're able to stay healthy. I think it is, like you said, a big deal that Caleb Biggers got number one. I think that is pretty telling, especially for Boise State. And if Kyle Wilson is the last one to wear number one, obviously Kyle Wilson had an amazing career and on into the NFL, and he was one of my favorite players to watch growing up. And so I think it'd be great to see him to continue to improve and excel this year.
I said it's going to be an incredible race here to see who ends up kind of at those top two spots for cornerback. But again, kind of also talking about the safety, but definitely more so with the cornerbacks here. Regardless, whoever gets that number one and number two, you're going to see a lot of guys throughout the season because, like you said, fatigue or just matchup. Maybe you got a team you're playing that this guy's a little bit faster or taller than you're expecting. You just see what you've seen in practice. You can think this guy's going to match up a little bit better. So I think you're definitely going to see all these guys come in and play, and it'll just depend on what kind of impact they have based on kind of where they end up on that depth chart there. But if I'm going to throw out a guess here, I'm going to say Biggers just because he did get that number one. He had a good season last year. He came in. I think he's going to improve into this season. So I'd say Biggers just, even without looking at the jersey number, has everything it takes to be a starter on this team. And then you throw in the fact of getting that number one. That's kind of significant. You don't want to necessarily have your number one sitting on the sideline, I don't think. So I think he'll probably take one of those. And then between the other two, honestly, I'm kind of right there with you. I think, for me, it'd probably be Reed or Kaniho. I know you mentioned Tyreek LaBeouf. I think he's a great big play player. I think his coverage game is not necessarily, he's kind of said that himself. It's not necessarily exactly where he wants to be. He's definitely been working on that. Kaniho is incredibly talented. Reed brings the experience and the talent. And of course, it would just kind of depend on how he comes back from that injury, if he's 110%. So if he comes back, he's 100%, no issues at all. I think probably Reed takes it, but you'll see Kaniho and Tyreek LaBeouf a bunch during the rest of the season as well. All right. Talking about the last one here, that nickel, kind of a little bit unique to other teams use it, but it's been a big part of Boise State, kind of that hybrid linebacker, cornerback position for Boise State, put some players in some interesting positions. You want to have guys with good awareness. It's a big part of the game. It was a big question mark for Boise State up until a week ago. It's going to be a big part of this video, and Boise State ended up solving it. But there was a lot of questions being thrown out there because obviously Kaniho, the older, he's gone. He was the main guy there for Boise State. Athlon Sports thought it was going to be Rodney Robinson. The Athletic thought it was going to be Kaniho, the younger. Idaho Statesman thought it was going to be Idaho Statesman thought it was going to be Shea Oladipo. I was really kind of pushing towards Shea Oladipo, and then they took Tyreek Jones, who was amazing at the safety position, and moved him over to nickel. Definitely had, when you talk about big hitters on the team, Jale Skinner caught a lot of the spotlight, especially for some of his earlier hits, like that big one against Oklahoma State. But Tyreek Jones, especially kind of pushing later to the season when Jale Skinner started getting hit with so many targeting fouls, and you kind of saw him maybe take a little bit of an edge off. Tyreek Jones was right there to keep continuing that big hit presence throughout the whole season, definitely in the second stretch. So when you get a guy like this, big guy who's got great awareness, put him down. I like this move, putting him down into nickel where he can use his tackling ability and his awareness. Obviously also had some interceptions last season as well. 52 tackles, 6 passes defended, 2 interceptions, and a forced fumble. Were you surprised at all by this move to take someone like, Tyreek Jones, who is so solid in his position at safety, and kind of put some stuff up in the air by throwing him in a position he's not used to? Were you surprised at all by this?
Yeah, I do think that's surprising. I want to get Coach Avalos' thoughts on that. I think because I think too, just from past years, like utilizing that position, kind of like Kaula Kaniho was, Shea would have been a good fit. I think when you move someone like Tyreek into that nickel position, you have someone that's experienced, someone that can be versatile, and that's a position that you can do a lot of things with. You can blitz them, you can put them into coverage. You can do a lot of different things with the nickel, and so maybe they're feeling more comfortable with somebody that's been there for a long time, has a lot of experience to throw a lot onto Tyreek's plate and be able to do things. Maybe they want a bigger presence in the box than they've kind of gone in the last couple years. I don't know. I'm curious. It does surprise me.
That's kind of our wrap up on talking about the playmakers and starters. We got a couple of questions for the season here that Boise State's going to have to kind of deal with. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll give our 3 keys to the game, and then our predictions here to wrap it up. So kind of going right here into 3 questions for the season. So question number 1 here is, how can they build consistency but keep that big play potential? So last season they were 91st in the nations in yard per catch given up. So in the average that they gave up per catch, they weren't that great. Obviously a lot of turnovers. They were great in the red zone, one of the top teams in the nation at preventing teams from actually getting there and scoring once they got inside the 20, but they gave up a lot of big plays between the 20s. How do you kind of build on that consistency but keep that big play potential?
I think a lot of it comes down to, especially in the secondary and in the back end, is communication. And I mean that in the sense of a lot of times, and not always, but a lot of times when big plays are happening in the secondary, it could be a result of kind of a busted coverage or a miscommunication. Sometimes people just get beat, and or the offense makes a good play. You gotta have a short memory, but I think starting up front with communication, making sure everybody in the secondary is aligned on the same page, is a huge thing, because when everybody's aligned and like we've talked about, these guys being athletic and talented, they're going to be able to make plays and they're going to be able to limit those and stay consistent. And so it all starts kind of pre-snap, making sure we're on the same page, and then just relying on their abilities, right? They're talented. They're playing at the D1 level. They practice it over and over again. You get beat, but in terms of limiting that and staying consistent, I think it starts pre-snap in their communication.
Is there a little bit of a thought process where maybe you think more about preventing the pass versus getting that interception, and kind of the interceptions just happen? I mean, when you go out and you're kind of playing there, right? You had some pretty good interceptions in your career. Is there a point where you're kind of thinking more about that pick versus just batting it down? And how do you kind of balance that as a secondary player?
For me, it was always the ball's in the air. I'm going to try to pick it. I'm going to try to get a turnover. Even if I can only get one hand on it, I'm going to try to catch it with the one hand sort of thing. If it's 2nd and long and you bat it down, but you could have tried to go for the pick, they still have a 3rd down where they can go do something, right? And so for me, it was always try to get the ball, try to turn it over regardless. And if you're trying to do that, most of the time, it's going to result in, if you don't catch it, it'll probably result in a pass breakup anyways. And so you're just like, no, I want to hit it away. You'll never really have a chance to make plays or to make game-changing plays like that. And so for me, it was always, no, we're trying to get the ball back for the offense.
Is there kind of a point where you kind of go, okay, game scenario here, they've got 3rd down and long. We don't need to pick this. We just need to stop them from tackling that. Is that a point where you kind of think a little bit more of just saying, let's just get them on the ground versus taking that pick?
Yeah, I definitely think in terms of game situations, right? If they're going for, if it's like end of game, end of half type of thing, you're taught to be a lot smarter with the ball in the air. Me personally, though, with something like that, if it's 3rd and 13 and he felt like he had an opportunity to make a play on the ball, you just better not miss, right? you better not miss. But I'm never thinking like, I never want to go into my mindset going into a situation to be like, oh, what if I miss this when I go for it? You know what I mean? Obviously, it's safer to make sure that that's not going to be a possibility. That's what I'm saying. Like, even if I can only get one hand on it, my responsibility at the end of the day is to make the play, to let them catch the ball, or to 3rd and 13 with the game on the line. You better be a lot safer in your approach. If you felt like, I guess I would just say safer in your approach of, I'm going to be my angle is going to be right at the guy, or maybe top shoulder of the guy. And if last second I feel like I can cut that off, I'm going to go make a play. And if I miss, I'm not going to miss the tackle, sort of thing. Right. But yeah. Me personally, it's always like, no, if I can go make a play, especially in a big moment like that. Not to where it's selfish, but I mean, it's going to benefit the team. I'm going to go make a play. So I guess the balance is where you need, the more risks, the smarter risks that you can take, I guess, in that sense for sure.
Well, that kind of leads perfectly into the second question here when you're talking about that mindset and you don't want to take anything off. You want to go out and give that 100%. Obviously, foul trouble was a big thing for Boise State, and you kind of saw it towards kind of the second half of the season. It seemed to get a little bit in Skinner's head a bit, and he wasn't making necessarily as big of the hits. How do you maintain that intensity without getting into foul trouble? Obviously, you don't want your players taking intensity out of the game, but you also don't want your best players missing halves, as comes with the targeting rule. So how do you maintain that intensity while also kind of treading the line and say, all right, we don't want our best guys getting taken out by targeting?
Yeah, and I think that is a tricky balance as to where it's like, oh, now I'm completely changing my game because I'm so worried about what could happen. But then again, I clearly need to make sure that I'm making some changes to where I'm able to contribute and I'm in the game and I'm not taking myself out so I can help my team win, sort of thing. It's hard because in the game of football, you always have to have short memory, making mistakes, but you also need to be able to learn from those mistakes. And so I think it's a balance of, say specifically for this example with JL, you only get one mistake and then you're out for a half or the next half. And so it sucks, but maybe in practice leading up, it's every time I'm tagging off, I'm cognizant, I'm aware of where I'm hitting and where my head's at in this and where I'm targeting a tag off and being really aware of it in practice throughout the week. And in the game, go play and go do what you do and hope that your repetitions and your awareness of that specific thing in practice has carried you to where you don't have to think about it. Because I think when you are thinking about that, then it does affect your game. It does change, and you're not able to make as many plays as you normally would. Big hits are big momentum shifts, and if you're thinking about that the whole time, it's just another thing that you don't need to add to your play. So him in that situation, being really aware of that in practice and where everything is at when you're targeting things and making sure that everything is very intentional so that when you go out in the game, you can go be the big hitter that you are, but you know that you've trained the right way.
Well, hey, the great thing is that if players play the way that you're kind of talking about, where they just go out and say, what is, I go out and I do the best play that I can. And if the referees call targeting, they call targeting. The great news is if they do end up playing like that, Boise State has a bunch of depth in the cornerback and the safety position. Like we talked about, we're kind of talking about three guys that might take that second spot. But even beyond them, you've got a sixth-year player in Jared Reed who probably can go out there and contribute a little bit as well. So I think that Boise State, their secondary, especially kind of when you're talking about these big guys like Skinner, go out and make the big hits. That shouldn't be on their mind at all. They go out, they do what they can. If it goes the wrong way, if they end up getting targeting called on, then there's guys behind them that can step up and contribute at about the same level or the same level as well and keep the game going. So last question here is who kind of sets the tone on defense this season? Last year, the first half, it was kind of JL Skinner, and then he was still there, but kind of towards the back end, it was Tariq Jones kind of making a big impact for Boise State. You had a bunch of different guys kind of peak as far as interceptions went throughout the year. Do you think we kind of see a little bit more of the regulars here again, just kind of Skinner kind of setting out again and some guys in the corners? Or do you think we see some different faces stepping up and making some big plays, kind of setting the tone for the defense this year?
I think every guy that we've talked about, especially in the secondary, has the potential to step up and make big plays. I think that Tyreek and JL will definitely feed off each other and be kind of the main leaders, the main voices out on the defense, leading the way in that sense. I think they're going to play really well. I think they're going to feed off of each other, have a lot of fun, a lot of experience, a lot of intelligence, and a lot of athleticism in those two guys. But like I said, in the secondary especially, there's a lot of guys that can go out, step up, and make plays and have the ability to do that. I think their D-line, I mean, not talking about the secondary, but I think their D-line got a lot of really talented guys there that will step up, be leaders, and make plays. And the linebackers, I think they have a really solid defense of guys that will rally around each other and feed off of each other. And we might see some new people. I think definitely JL and Tyreek will be at the head of the leadership.
Moving on to our three keys of the season here. My first key, kind of talking a little bit what we've already talked about already, is more coverage less picks. So I'm not saying you don't want to take the picks away, but as we talked about, Boise State had a great year for interceptions, but they gave up, one of their, the last 20 years, one of the most yards per carry that yards per catch they've given up in between. They had one of their lowest passes defended. From my perspective here, your first priority is to stop the player from being able to catch the ball. If you're able to get the pick, then you're able to get the pick. But I think when you're building into that consistency in between, being a little bit more coverage focused versus big play focused, I think it's going to help Boise State. I know you got a little bit of a different perspective. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, for the most part, that's definitely where it's at. I've always just personally had the mentality of like going out and making a big play, right? Like,
right.
Out there to go make plays, and if I'm making a play, then my guy's not catching it, sort of thing. Not sacrificing technique or fundamentals in that sense, but my mentality going in is always to go out there and make a play and intercept it. But I think when people are able to do their jobs, like defending the pass and I'm going to go out and do my job, then you find a lot of success on defense for sure. I think just personally, and maybe, yeah, I just always think that there's a lot of people that can go out and go do a job. There's not a lot of people out there that are going to make their presence known on defense, and they're going to go make a big play and shift the whole momentum of a game. So that was always the way that I looked at things, and I would like DBs to look at things because they can go out. And one of our coaches at the beginning of games while we were warming up and doing all that pregame stuff, he'd always be like, hey, DBs are playmakers. DBs go out and make plays. And so that's why I've always loved the position as well, as you can go out, you can go make a play and turn things around or continue to build on the momentum that you guys already have. And not to say that, I mean, I don't think it's wrong to have the mentality to go out and to know this guy's not catching the ball, and we'll as a team rally around getting off the field together and let other people do things. I've just gravitated more towards the trying to make plays side of things. So
I definitely don't think you're wrong when you're talking about going out there and just thinking I'm going to make the play and I better not miss. But again, we're kind of talking about a little bit of a team concept here. Just for me, as when I'm looking at statistics, obviously I'm not an on the field guy, but I played in high school, not in college. I don't have the same perspective you do. I've got more of an analysis look, but I'm just looking at the pure statistics. I'm just thinking I'd love to see that pass defended going up a little bit, less yards in between. And if that hurts interceptions a little bit, it hurts the interceptions a little bit. That's kind of what I'm getting with. I'm not saying don't go for the big play. I want to still see those picks, those pick sixes, those run backs, big hits. I want to see all of that. But I also want to see a little bit more consistency in between, where Boise State's not kind of having to rely on a miracle play to stop the drive, getting them off the field 3 and out a little bit earlier on. Second key here for Boise State is find the unit that works. Last year, you had a lot of guys cycling through. Part of that was because of injuries, but also it seemed a little bit during that season that Andy Avalos, he's coming in. He's got a new crop of guys. He's got, from his perspective, brand new head coach, a lot of experience, a lot of talent, and there's a lot of guys cycling through it. It didn't always seem to be just because they had a better matchup that game. They just kind of were trying to figure out who could go out there and make the big plays for them. So this year, I think they tested out a lot of faces. I think would help Boise State a little bit if they could kind of settle down on obviously if you got a matchup that works for someone else, you throw them in, but they could kind of have a little bit more, like we were talking about, those starters for Boise State that are going to be the guys you're going to see have consistency, build throughout the game as they're able to kind of build on the success they have and get to know that wide receiver that they're facing up against throughout the whole game. I think that's going to help Boise State develop a little bit of consistency here coming into the season. So that's my second key there, is just find a unit that works and kind of stick with them a little bit more this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think especially in terms of consistency, that'll help, because then these guys are able to build confidence, they're able to build chemistry and all those things. At Boise State, we're always taught that next up better be just as good. Second string, third string are preparing like starters, and so these guys need to be able to come in and, like they said, be interchangeable almost, to the sense of, we're just flowing. If we're missing a guy, it's not going to be a detriment. But I think definitely in terms of consistency and people getting the flow with each other, having a consistent unit that and can trust and rely on to be out there, to be playing together, is definitely going to help.
Well, the last key here for Boise State, and we've kind of talked a little bit about it already, I'm going to kind of swing the side I think we should go on this, is bring the hammer. I think we both kind of agree with that. we have the depth to deal with the referees or with what happens. Go out there and just play your heart out. You watch Andy Avalos' highlight tape. That's the kind of player he was. He was always making huge hits all over the field. It was a big part of what he was able to come in and install in these players. The intensity ramp up that I saw from 2020 to 2021, I think that was the biggest difference. I mean, you can talk about different schemes and everything like that, but when you talk about the energy and the momentum that Boise State was established on defense last year compared to what they did in 2020, that's because the intensity that Andy Avalos brought to this team. So I think Boise State needs that. They need those big hit moments that, like we said, change momentum in the game. Those big hit moments that get Boise State national attention. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that JL Skinner hit against that Oklahoma State end around, just played over and over and over again. I think it was on Top 10. I'm not sure, but they played it all over the time on ESPN. It's like the highlight of the week there. So Boise State, those big hits help with the team with momentum. They help inspire the fan base. And Boise State is really trying to grow and build some things on Jeremiah Dickey. So they need the fan base buy-in. And then they also obviously help bring that national attention as well. So for me, just kind of wrapping up these three keys: coverage, priority, find the unit that works, and then bring the hammer. And that's my third key for Boise State.
100%. That was one of my favorite things about Coach Avalos' coaching style when I was there. His whole mentality and the mentality that he brought to a defense. And I think especially on defense, different than offense, mentality is just a huge thing. That was what he always coached and preached, and said everything starts with the mentality. And when you have a defense that's out there with that, to come out to make their presence known. When you run our way, you're going to get hit and you're going to feel it. When you throw our way, it's either going to get picked or you're going to get hit and you're going to feel it, or it's going to get passed. The pass is going to get defended. But having a mentality out there that you guys are the dudes on the field, and they're going to have to earn everything that they get, and they're going to feel everything that comes their way. And I think that's a huge strength to Coach Avalos' coaching style. I think he does that really well. And I think the coaching staff that he's brought along with him are able to do that really well. And I think if they can maintain that mentality and make that a focus and a key, like you've talked about, which they will. I mean, like I said, that's kind of his backbone. And like you said, when he was playing, that's just who he is. And that's how he inspires his players as well.
Well, finally moving into our last section here, predictions. This will be real quick, and then we'll just kind of wrap up here. So just kind of some predictions off the top. I'll just throw some that I've got. So secondary specific predictions. I think that Boise State, they had a great year with interceptions last year. I expect a similar number last season. So last year they had, 13 interceptions overall. So 12 of those by the secondary. I think you're going to see a similar number, somewhere between 11 and 15 interceptions. I just think that the style of defense that Andy Avalos brings, where it's really high intensity and a lot of focus and kind of making those big plays, making those big turnovers. I think you're going to continue to see that this next season. So 11 to 15 interceptions is what I'm predicting for Boise State. I think secondary continues to improve and continues to be one of the top teams for Boise State. I think that they have a chance to be, this secondary, I think has a chance to be one of the best secondaries Boise State's ever had. I think that they made a really good case for that last year, but I think when you talk about historic Boise State secondaries, you start talking about that 2019, 2010 secondaries. I think that Boise State has a chance to that level with this secondary unit that they have across the board. There's just so many playmakers. So I think they have a chance to be remembered as one of the greatest secondary units for Boise State. I think that BSU gets at least 2 players kicked out for targeting this season. I think that is going to continue to be the trend, at least 2. I mean, maybe 4. I mean, just because Boise State brings that intensity. And you know what? I don't hope they get kicked out for targeting, but I hope they're bringing enough intensity that the referees are going, was that targeting? I think I want to see those big hits, those big plays for Boise State. Obviously keep the right technique in, but go out there and make those big plays. I think Boise State has some guys that are going to go out and do that. I think that Skinner becomes a household name for Boise State across the nation. And I think that he will earn his way into being a consensus first-round NFL draft prospect by the end of the year. So that's my overall predictions. I don't know if you have any secondary predictions, if you want to throw out a record prediction here at the end or anything else you want to say.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good predictions. I agree with you. I think they have a really special group, really talented group, and the capability of having a really special year, especially in the secondary. Probably not as good as the 2019 group or the 2017 group. No, I'm just kidding. I think they have really special players, a lot of talent, and a lot of guys that can do some special things. And I love those guys, all those guys that we talked about. Really excited to see them ball out this season. I think they'll have a really good year, and I think they'll be really fun to watch. Go out, fly around, make plays, make big hits. If JL gets thrown out twice for targeting, does that count as your two players, or is it got two separate players? He might get thrown out twice. I hope that he doesn't. He might do better this year. Still have some big hits, but just in the right zones. But I think these guys. I think these guys are going to do really well. Excited to watch them ball out and see them continue to grow, to play together. And I think they have something really special for sure.
Do you want to take a shot at a record prediction or something similar to that?
I think they're going to go undefeated.
All right. Nice. I've had like 3 guests say that so far, so I'm pretty excited. I'll remind all fans, I've got one more video in this series. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. And then at the end, I'll do my Boise State schedule review and predictions. So that'll be the last of the unofficial 7th video in the series. Have that coming out in a few weeks here. But thank you so much for coming on and doing this. This was an incredible video. I thought you brought it a great perspective as a player who's played under Andy Avalos, a guy who's been on the team not that long ago. You know, you talked about, was it 3 years ago? Or 4 years ago now. But, 2019, so not that long ago here, part of this team. Player under Andy Avalos brought a great perspective to this position, to this discussion. Obviously, a great player yourself for Boise State, and I hope fans have enjoyed the highlights I've sprinkled in throughout some of your playing days there for Boise State. So thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Thanks so much, everybody, for sticking around and watching through this video. This was a great discussion. Like I already said, I've got one more video in the series coming up. That's going to be the wide receiver, tight end, or the skill position preview. That's going to be the last one in the series. It's going to be a little bit more of a panel discussion. We're going to have Dryzen James, Derek Schumann, and recently confirmed we are going to have Gilligan as well on that panel to discuss the Boise State skill position. So bunch of great guys, not necessarily quite as recent players as we have had here with Nawahine, but some great guys who were part of some historic teams. Obviously, that Fiesta Bowl that we mentioned already, a couple of those guys were part of that as well. So thank you so much for coming on and watching this. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this discussion, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, share this around. Thanks so much for being part of this. And as always, go Big Blue!